Shalom everyone. I want to make a quick video in which I'll be making clear that evildoers, they're basically like refugees. Um, there's this whole refugee crisis going on in Europe, especially with Syrian refugees. And I'm going to use that as an example. You see, it's true that ISIS and other terrorist organizations are beheading and murdering people in Syria and northern Iraq. And there are many people all over the world now joining ISIS. Such things are true. Okay? And it's therefore, if your environment becomes dangerous and unhealthy for you, you should leave. Go to a better environment. That's sound. That's how healthy people think. But now, I want to look at this from a spiritual point of view, and I'm not talking about and this is apart from the Syrian issue. People that persist in negativity, they are also refugees, but they're refugees they are fleeing from the truth. They are fleeing from reality. So what they basically do is they construct this hyper reality in their mind, and they're looking for people, they're using people as validation for that hyper reality. You see? And everyone they see that cannot be in harmony with their hyper reality, they resist. They become violent against them. They label them as subhuman. Why? Because persistent accusers don't want accountability. They don't want to deal with the fact that they've dehumanized other people, that they have harmed other people. Because listen, I'm going to give an illustration now. Let's say it's the 1970s and you have the Vietnam War. By the way, this is nothing against Vietnam veterans, okay? Just an example I'm using as an illustration. Let's say that you have you have quite some soldiers from the USA going to fight the war in Vietnam. And of course, there were protests against the war, but when the soldiers came back, they received medals of honor. You fought for your country, son. We are proud of you. Also, family members were proud that one of their family members defended America. Or let's take a European example. You have war against terrorism in Iraq and Afghanistan. You had soldiers going over there to fight against the enemy, to defend democracy, to defend our way of life. Nobody talks about the millions of people, children, women, innocent. I'm not saying innocent that they have no sin, but innocent that they had nothing to do with the conflict. They're not talking about, especially children, that couldn't have been guilty of any of those things, that they are being murdered. They're not talking about the fact that after they bombed a few places, criminal gangs take over because there's nothing to prevent criminals from becoming active. Because if you destroy a community, the community has to build themselves up, and when the community is at its weakest point, criminals like to take over. For example, when in 1945, when America dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, the city was basically destroyed, not completely, but a lot of houses were gone, and the Yakuza began to kidnap young girls that end up in prostitution. Now, does American historians talk about that? Does the school system talk about that consequence of what America did in Japan? No. Nobody cares about those young girls that were raped possibly their whole lives till they were grown up and were used as sex objects by the criminal gangs in Japan. Well, the criminal gangs were active no matter what, but because the city was bombed, a secondary consequence was that now the environment was so vulnerable that evil people could take advantage of it. You see? This also happened in Vietnam, and it's also happening in countries as Iraq, also Syria and Afghanistan, all those places where so-called Western nations, when Western armies went to fight for democracy, to preserve our way of life. And don't realize it, it's always our way of life that needs to be defended. Nobody asks for the value of those other people over there. So when you go and you fight to defend our selfish expectations, selfish capitalistic expectations, you are the hero. You did not fight against human beings, you fought against the enemy, against the devil. You fight against them, you're good. You're a good soldier, you did well. Not only with war, internationally, also domestically, such things happen. Okay? You have groups, ethnic groups in the community that suffer disadvantage by the economic policy, and they will find a way to survive in other means. Now, if you don't want them to survive in other means, then change the economic structure so that everyone benefits. People don't want to do that. They want to exploit. And they will blame the exploited group for leaving the system. And then they will throw them in jail, or they will, and then you have a lot of men and young boys in jail. And so you have families without fathers, and you have basically a lot of traumas in that community, but nobody cares. It's the law of the land. It's the law. We have to honor the law. And judges and lawyers they all like Freemasons. They agree that they are not guilty of anything. And because people can continue with their selfish lifestyles, we don't care about those people. They're not people. They are parasites. They are. You have other names for them. But there's a catch here. There's a catch, guys. A lot from Vietnam. I use Vietnam as an example. Around 100,000 U.S. veterans from Vietnam committed suicide. Not immediately, but in a span of around 35 years, they committed suicide. 100,000, and there are more hundreds of thousands that were involved with the Vietnam War that suffered from mental illness, and some became psychopathic murderers, serial killers, that although they can't control themselves anymore, they keep on seeing enemies everywhere and begin to shoot people. You see? And many of them could not, they were so emotionally affected by it that they couldn't keep a stable job, so they ended up homeless. There are about 40,000 homeless U.S. veterans, not only from the Vietnam, but also from other wars. The same happens in Europe, but people in Europe don't want to talk about it. Okay? Look, when the moment is there, when there's a danger, it's very easy to dehumanize the other group, to dehumanize that other individual. You see, and at the moment you also have people that agree with you and cheer you, so you feel great. So if you abuse them, beat them, molest them, do whatever you want to them, you don't feel that, you don't care at all because they're not human, they're just the enemy, or they're just a troublemaker. You have this with bullying in school. You have victims of bullying that strike back, and now the victim is being expelled from school, and people say, well, he was a troublemaker anyway. People don't want to give up. People don't want to acknowledge that they agreed with abuse by not doing anything against it, so now they want to remove the victim so they can feel good about themselves. And they all have to agree he's not really human. He's a troublemaker, or he's pathetic. You see, but that all happens in the heat of the moment, or when there's celebrations. It feels good. You can do whatever you want with the enemy, or whoever you choose to dehumanize. But there is a backlash. It can take 5 years. Sometimes it takes only a few days, but it can take 5 years, 10 years, or even 30 years. The moment will come that what you did to those human beings will haunt you. Why? Because you programmed your mind and your emotions that they're not human. But your mind that screens reality, you see, even when your mind is darkened and defiled, your mind still recognizes they're humans. So there comes a moment that it will come back to you from, hold on a minute, those were human beings. As a soldier, I murdered men. I made wives widows. I made children fatherless. I made children orphans. Or those were kids that were taken advantage of. I was a kid too. What did I do? And hold on a minute, I celebrated the abuse of others. So see, everything is coming back, and you will have to deal with it. You see, and the thing is, people can't deal with it. That's why people are always looking for excuses, and they always want others to agree with them with those excuses, so that they won't have to be, so that they won't be convicted. That's why you have military celebrations, military parades. Is just to alleviate the guilt from the consciousness of the community. That's why after a war or something happens, often there's a big distraction like festivals, American Idol, whatever, to distract people. Why all these distractions? So that people won't remember the collective crimes that were going on. It happens on a local scale, like in high school, and it also happens in an international scale, like with wars between nation states. But that backlash is real, it's reality, and it happens to everyone, you see. That's why a lot of people, they indulge themselves in all kinds of activities so that they won't have to look at their contribution to the evil that happened. You see, because even if you were not the one firing the gun, if you have a self-centered attitude that you don't care about anything else but yourself, and you only are valuing other people for whenever they benefit you, or you don't want to look at your own contribution stuff, you are also contributing by your attitude to evil, because you're not taking responsibility for your contribution on earth. When people talk about evil, you look the other way, you say, I'm not interested, I don't care, I just want to have fun. Okay, you contributed. So later on, when things come back to you, you see, you try to play it away by sex, drugs, rock and roll, or by drinking. There are people that give themselves completely over to their job, in their profession, become professionals at their job. There's nothing wrong with being a pro in a job, but often people, they throw themselves completely at their work so that they won't have to give an account for their contribution to collective crimes. You see? And guys, this backlash is real. It is. And that's what I want to tell you guys, that what we see going on now in the world is that you have collective backlashes that are manifesting around us, you see? And I still want to talk about those Syrian refugees. Not all of those men that entered Europe are real refugees. Okay, many of them may even be ISIS fighters. Okay, but anyway, you have a lot of people fleeing and coming here. Many people are asking, why don't the European parliaments, why don't the European states just say, no, we don't want refugees? The thing is, Western countries for decades have been supporting jihadist groups to fight against secular governments in order to keep capitalism running. You see? And the populations over here, they just benefited from it, from the advantage. They went to school, they went to college, they had sex with illicit sex with many people they want, they were smoking weed, they were doing their thing when they were young, then they got a job, and they just did their thing, and they didn't care at all what their governments and what their armies were doing with their tax money that they are paying to those other people out there. They didn't care, they didn't exist. It's not within our circle, so it doesn't exist, so it doesn't matter. Okay? So now today, we have internet, we have social media, and we can immediately see the effects of apathy. And we now can all see the damage done to children and women and all kinds of disadvantaged groups. So now that the European countries are openly confronted with the consequences of their selfishness, now they have to give an account. Why did we allow our governments and our people to support those jihadist groups? Why were we so willingly naive by just taking all the advantages that came from what our governments were doing or what the companies were doing? Why did we indoctrinate our children not to think for themselves? Why? They cannot explain it, because else they have to admit their contribution to the evil that's going on. So what's happening now? To ease the collective guilt, they are allowing lots of immigrants to come in. And now, what's happening now is that many of those immigrants are taking advantage of it. You see? And now that they are being taken advantage of, many European countries, many of them don't want to say no more refugees. Why? Because the moment they would say no more refugees, we don't want to help anyone anymore, the world is going to show them the evidence of what has been going on for decades. And also the populations, the communities in those European states, they will be confronted with what their parents and their grandparents supported. You see? And well, once they are confronted with evidence, those millions of Europeans will have to deal with it. And they don't want it. You see? They don't even want to deal with the collective crimes they're committing with themselves in their own region, let alone with what they contributed to other regions. You see? And listen, people are not very good at dealing with, evidence against them. You see? A lot of people tend to lash out and tend to become psychopaths and begin to kill people. And European governments are aware of this. That's why they have a double-minded policy. They are taking all those refugees in because of the collective guilt, to ease the collective guilt, and to say that, you see, we're not all bad. There are good people among us. We help refugees. And when they are being taken advantage of, it's they tend to avoid talking about it. The thing is, they're reaping what they've sown. Okay? And the thing is, they don't want to deal with the harvest, but yeah, you guys sowed it. So that's my view upon the circumstance. Okay, you can disagree with me. But anyway, all of these things that have been going on, Vietnam War, the war on terrorism, also Syrian refugees, it just shows you that persistent accusers know they're living in a hyper-reality, and they are the real refugees. If your country is being bombed, or if you're in an abusive household and you need to flee, then you're doing what's wise. Okay, but you're fleeing for circumstances only temporarily, because soon you will be in another place where you can build your own life. But the thing is, people that are, let's say evil people, they are always on the run. They're always looking for an excuse. They're always looking for someone to blame. Why? Because they cannot live with themselves. Unless they repent and become born again, they will remain that way and they'll perish for all eternity. And the thing is, if they perish, it's by their own dedication. It's not God's will, nor because there's a need for reprobates. No, they turn reprobates by their own dedication. So this video was not to accuse anyone, nor to point fingers. I just want to reveal something to you guys. You see, it's easy to be distracted by the economic things and by the political things that are happening. You see, the real spiritual issues should not be forgotten. You see, yes, there are many refugees and many immigrants, also illegal immigrants, coming into Western countries, into America. You see, and a lot of them have bad intentions, that's true. But we need to look at our own contribution to the circumstance. And only when we are transparent and open and to repent of our iniquities, then there's a way open for solutions. You see? But I'll be realistic. Those solutions will not come because people don't want to repent. What does this mean for believers? Believers just hold on to the faith, fight the good fight of faith, keep trusting in the Lord Jesus Christ. The world is getting worse and worse. But for those that trust Christ, there are solutions and there's hope. It's either you have Christ or you perish. Well, that's what I want to say with this video. Enjoy your day and may the grace of Christ be with you. Shalom.